It was a cool evening in the fall of 1986. The staging lights glowed against the darkness. The smell of burnt rubber hung in the air. On one side of the drag strip sat a rumbling V8 Camaro. On the other, a black Buick Regal that barely made a sound. People laughed. Some pointed. A luxury Buick with a V6 against a muscle car? The lights dropped. For a split second, the Camaro jumped ahead. Then the Buick's turbocharger came alive. The rear tires dug in, the nose lifted, and within seconds, the supposedly boring Buick stormed past the V8, crossing the finish line first. The crowd fell silent, because they hadn't just watched a V6 win. They had watched decades of American muscle car tradition get turned upside down. But what almost nobody knows is that this wasn't luck. It wasn't a one-off race, and it certainly wasn't an accident. Behind that quiet Buick was one of the smartest engineering projects General Motors had ever approved. A project so effective that it embarrassed the company's own V8-powered performance cars. A project that forced racers across America to completely rethink what made a car fast. And ironically, the engine wasn't even supposed to become a legend. Most people think the muscle car era ended sometime in the early 1970s. High-compression V8s disappeared. Horsepower numbers collapsed. Insurance companies punished performance buyers, and stricter emissions regulations choked the life out of engines that had once ruled American roads. By the early 1980s, performance looked almost hopeless. The legendary Chevrolet 454 was gone. Chrysler's Street Hemi had vanished. Even Ford's biggest V8s had become shadows of their former selves. If you wanted speed, most enthusiasts believed there was only one answer: buy a V8. More cylinders meant more power. Bigger displacement meant faster acceleration. That wasn't just common knowledge, it was practically American law. But hidden inside Buick, a small group of engineers had started asking a dangerous question. What if everyone was wrong? Buick wasn't exactly known for building street fighters. The brand had spent decades selling comfortable family cars to buyers who cared more about smooth rides than quarter-mile times. While Chevrolet built Corvettes and Camaro Z28s, Buick focused on quiet cabins, soft suspensions, and chrome trim. Performance wasn't part of its identity, yet beneath the surface, something interesting had been happening since the late 1970s. Instead of chasing larger engines, Buick engineers became fascinated with turbocharging. At first, it sounded almost ridiculous. Turbochargers were still uncommon on American production cars. They were often associated with expensive European sports cars or experimental race programs. Many manufacturers viewed them as unreliable, overly complicated, and difficult to package for everyday drivers. But Buick saw opportunity. A turbocharger could force more air into a small engine. More air meant more fuel could be burned. More fuel meant more power. Suddenly, displacement wasn't the only path to performance anymore. The company's first experiments were far from perfect. Early turbocharged versions of Buick's 3.8-liter V6 suffered from severe turbo lag. Drivers would press the accelerator, wait, and then receive a sudden burst of boost. Carbureted fuel systems struggled to deliver consistent mixtures under boost pressure. Detonation became a constant threat. Some engineers inside GM reportedly questioned whether the project should continue at all. But the Buick team refused to give up, and that's when the real engineering began. The engine itself displaced 231 cubic inches, or 3.8 liters. It featured a cast iron block and cast iron cylinder heads, heavy by modern standards, but incredibly durable under boost. Its bore measured 3.80 inches, while the stroke came in at 3.40 inches, creating an almost square design that balanced torque with respectable rev capability. Compression ratio was intentionally kept low at just 8.0 to 1. To many enthusiasts, that sounded disappointing, but under turbocharged conditions, it became one of the engine's greatest strengths. Lower compression allowed the LC2 to safely accept far more compressed air than naturally aspirated engines of the day. That simple decision would eventually allow owners to double the factory horsepower without replacing the engine block. The engineers weren't building a fragile race engine, they were building something that could survive abuse. Fuel delivery also evolved dramatically. By the mid-1980s, Buick abandoned carburetors in favor of sequential electronic fuel injection. Combined with electronic spark control and knock sensors, the computer could constantly adjust ignition timing whenever it detected detonation. Instead of destroying itself, the engine learned to protect itself. Then came the biggest breakthrough. For 1986, engineers added an air-to-air intercooler. It looked like a simple aluminum heat exchanger sitting between the turbocharger and intake manifold. But its impact was enormous. Compressing air creates heat. Hot air is less dense and far more likely to cause detonation. By cooling the compressed intake charge before it entered the cylinders, the intercooler dramatically increased oxygen density while reducing the chance of knock. Cooler air, more oxygen, more power, more reliability. It sounds obvious today. Back then, it transformed the entire personality of the engine. Officially, Buick rated the intercooled LC2 at just 245 horsepower and 355 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers looked respectable, but they also confused nearly everyone. How could a 245 horsepower V6 suddenly outrun V8s producing similar or even higher advertised horsepower? The answer was hiding in plain sight. Many engineers and historians now agree that Buick intentionally underrated the engine's output. Independent chassis dyno testing strongly suggested the real crankshaft horsepower was significantly higher than the brochure claimed. Some estimates placed it well above 275 horsepower in completely stock form. Torque delivery was even more shocking. Peak torque arrived at just around 2,800 revolutions per minute, producing an explosive surge that hit far earlier than many naturally aspirated V8 rivals. The result wasn't just impressive on paper. It completely changed what happened when the lights turned green. And once racers began discovering what a few pounds of extra boost could do, the V8 establishment was about to face its biggest embarrassment yet. The first time most V8 owners lost to a turbocharged Buick, they usually had the same excuse: the other guy must have modified it. It was easier to believe that than to accept the truth. Because from the outside, the Grand National looked almost ordinary. There were no giant hood scoops, no screaming decals, no massive rear wing, just black paint, subtle fender vents, and a small 3.8 SFI turbo badge that most people never noticed. That was exactly how Buick wanted it. But there was one problem. Getting all that turbocharged power to the pavement wasn't nearly as easy as making it. The LC2's Garrett T3 turbocharger could generate around 15 psi of boost in stock form. That kind of instant torque exposed every weak link in the drivetrain. Rear tires spun uncontrollably. Drive shafts twisted under repeated hard launches. Automatic transmissions overheated after back-to-back passes. Engineers had created a monster. Now they had to teach it some manners. Fortunately, Buick had chosen one of the toughest transmissions General Motors produced, the 4-speed 204R automatic. Inside the Grand National, it received stronger internals, a performance valve body, and a torque converter carefully matched to the turbocharger's boost characteristics. Instead of shocking the drivetrain with a violent clutch dump like many manual V8 cars, the automatic allowed the turbo to build boost before launch. Racers quickly learned to hold the brake with one foot, press the throttle with the other, and let boost climb before the green light. The technique became known as brake boosting. When the light dropped, the turbo was already awake. The result looked almost unfair. While naturally aspirated V8s needed engine speed to build power, the Buick exploded off the line with maximum torque almost instantly. Most people don't realize that drag races are often won in the first 60 feet. The Grand National understood that better than anyone. Car magazines soon started proving what racers had been seeing every weekend. A stock 1986 Grand National consistently ran the quarter mile in about 13.9 seconds at roughly 99 miles per hour. That might not sound outrageous today, but in 1986, those numbers placed it among the quickest production cars in America. Then came the comparisons. Chevrolet's Camaro IROC Z, powered by a tuned port-injected 5.7-liter V8, usually needed the mid-14-second range to complete the quarter mile. Ford's Mustang GT, equipped with its famous 5.0-liter high-output V8, was a favorite among enthusiasts. Yet on a typical drag strip, the Buick usually left first, and stayed there. Even Chevrolet's C4 Corvette found itself uncomfortably close to Buick's family coupe in acceleration testing. Imagine spending thousands more for a Corvette, only to watch a turbocharged Buick disappear down the quarter mile. That wasn't supposed to happen. And then the real nightmare started for the V8 crowd. Owners discovered just how much hidden potential the LC2 actually had. Unlike many naturally aspirated engines that required expensive cylinder head work, aggressive camshafts, or increased displacement to make serious gains, the Buick responded to incredibly simple modifications: a freer flowing exhaust, a better fuel pump, higher octane gasoline, a revised engine chip, a few more pounds of boost. That's it. Those modest upgrades routinely pushed Grand Nationals deep into the 12-second quarter-mile range, while the engine remained completely unopened. No forged crankshaft, no aftermarket pistons, no expensive internal rebuild, just more boost. The physics made perfect sense. Every extra pound of boost forced more oxygen into the cylinders. More oxygen allowed more fuel to burn. More combustion created more cylinder pressure, and more cylinder pressure translated directly into horsepower. The cast iron block simply kept taking it. Its thick cylinder walls, rigid bottom end, and conservative factory tune provided a safety margin that many owners never fully appreciated until they started modifying the cars. But even the LC2 wasn't indestructible. As boost pressures climbed beyond 20 pounds, new problems emerged. Detonation became the enemy again. Poor quality fuel caused destructive pre-ignition. Head gaskets became the weak point, especially when owners chased bigger numbers without upgrading fuel systems. Fortunately, the solution wasn't complicated. Higher flow fuel injectors ensured enough gasoline reached the cylinders under heavy boost. Better intercoolers reduced intake temperatures even further, while race gasoline or alcohol injection dramatically reduced detonation. Suddenly, engines making well over 400 horsepower became surprisingly reliable. Some street cars reached 500 horsepower using the factory short block. That was almost unheard of during the 1980s. And here's what made it even crazier. Many of those modified Buicks still idled smoothly. They still had air conditioning. They still drove to work every morning. Then they embarrassed another V8 on Saturday night. Word spread fast. Drag racers began hunting Grand Nationals at local tracks. Magazine editors requested comparison tests. Chevrolet loyalists argued the Buick must be cheating somehow. It wasn't. It was simply using technology that much of Detroit still underestimated. Turbocharging wasn't replacing displacement. It was multiplying it. By 1987, Buick engineers decided they had one final surprise left. If the Grand National had already shaken the performance world, its ultimate evolution was about to become a legend. By the spring of 1987, the rumors had spread across America. If you pulled up next to a black Buick at a stoplight, you didn't laugh anymore. You looked twice. And then Buick raised the stakes one final time. The company partnered with ASC and McLaren Technologies to create something even more extreme. It wasn't a completely new car. It was a carefully engineered evolution of the Grand National. Its name was simple: GNX, 3 letters that would become legendary. Only 547 examples were built, instantly making it one of the rarest American performance cars of the era. Each started life as a Grand National before being sent to ASC/McLaren, where engineers transformed it into something far more serious. The turbocharger received a larger ceramic turbine wheel that reduced rotating mass and improved response. A less restrictive exhaust system helped the engine breathe under boost. A recalibrated engine control module optimized fuel and ignition timing, while a larger intercooler duct improved cooling efficiency. Even the suspension was redesigned with a unique rear setup using a panhard rod and revised control arms to reduce wheel hop and improve traction during hard launches. Every modification served one purpose: get every ounce of power to the pavement. Officially, Buick claimed the GNX produced 276 horsepower and 360 pound-feet of torque. Almost nobody believed those numbers. Road testers certainly didn't. Independent testing consistently suggested the engine was making well over 300 horsepower at the crank, with torque figures approaching 400 pound-feet. Some engineers later admitted the published numbers were intentionally conservative, partly to avoid overshadowing Chevrolet's Corvette. Think about that for a moment. GM may have intentionally underrated its own engine to protect the image of its V8 sports car. That alone tells you how extraordinary the LC2 had become. Then came the performance tests. Car and driver recorded a 0 to 60 time of approximately 4.7 seconds. The quarter mile disappeared in around 13.4 seconds at more than 102 miles per hour. Those numbers weren't just impressive, they were shocking. The 1987 Corvette couldn't match them in a straight line. Neither could the Camaro IROC Z. Ford's Mustang 5.0 was left chasing taillights. Even many European sports cars costing significantly more struggled to keep up. The quiet Buick had become America's dragstrip king. And it wasn't winning with cubic inches. It was winning with engineering. The aftermarket exploded almost overnight. Companies developed larger turbochargers, improved intercoolers, high-flow injectors, upgraded fuel pumps, performance chips, and stronger transmissions. The LC2 kept rewarding owners for improving the systems around it. Boost pressure climbed, horsepower followed. Stock engines began producing 450 horsepower, then 500, then 600. Some dedicated drag racers eventually pushed factory blocks beyond 800 horsepower with carefully engineered combinations. That sounds unbelievable, yet countless builders proved it was possible. The cast iron block remained incredibly rigid. With proper tuning, enough fuel, and careful control of detonation, the LC2 became one of the strongest production turbo V6 engines America had ever seen. Of course, there were limits. At extreme boost levels, head gaskets remained a concern. Factory connecting rods eventually reached their mechanical limits. But those failures happened because enthusiasts were chasing numbers the original engineers never imagined. For a production engine designed during the emissions era, its durability bordered on unbelievable. You can probably guess what happened next. Other manufacturers started paying attention. During the 1990s and 2000s, turbocharging slowly became the future. Today, twin-turbo V6s power everything from high-performance pickup trucks to Le Mans race cars and supercars. But back in 1986, Buick had already shown the formula worked, years before it became fashionable. Unfortunately, success couldn't protect the LC2 from changing times. General Motors was restructuring its performance strategy. New front-wheel drive platforms were replacing traditional rear-wheel drive coupes. The Grand National's success also created an uncomfortable problem inside GM. It had become too fast. When a Buick Regal consistently out-accelerates Chevrolet's Halo sports car, internal politics become difficult to ignore. At the end of the 1987 model year, production quietly ended. The LC2 disappeared. The Grand National vanished. The GNX became an instant collector's item. Just like that, one of America's greatest performance engines was gone. But legends rarely stay buried. Throughout the 1990s, Grand National values began climbing. Drag racers searched junkyards for LC2 engines. Restoration shops specialized in bringing neglected cars back to life. Internet forums filled with tuning guides and quarter-mile times. Today, pristine 1987 GNXs regularly sell for well into six figures. Even standard Grand Nationals have become highly sought-after collector cars, proving that the market finally recognizes what many racers discovered decades ago. The LC2 wasn't simply another turbo engine. It changed the way enthusiasts thought about performance. It proved that intelligence could beat tradition, that boost could beat displacement, and that 6 cylinders, when engineered correctly, could humble 8. So why did this V6 embarrass every V8 on the drag strip? It wasn't because it had more displacement. It didn't. It wasn't because it made outrageous factory horsepower. On paper, it didn't. It won because Buick understood something many competitors didn't. Power isn't just about how much air an engine breathes. It's about when that power arrives, how efficiently it's delivered, and whether the entire package can use every bit of it. The LC2 combined a rugged cast iron foundation, a 3.80-inch bore, a 3.40-inch stroke, an 8.0-to-1 compression ratio, electronic fuel injection, intercooling, and turbocharging into one brilliantly balanced package. It delivered massive low-end torque, responded beautifully to tuning, and remained reliable enough to become one of the most feared street engines of its generation. It didn't just beat V8s, it forced them to evolve, and perhaps that's the greatest compliment any engine can ever receive. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments which forgotten performance engine you'd like to see next. There are plenty of incredible machines that changed automotive history without getting the credit they deserved. And if you love deep dives into the engineering, rivalries, and untold stories behind legendary engines, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.